Hey guys, so today I'm going to be doing my July wrap up. So I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in July, and I did participate in 3 readathons in July. So I participated in the koreadathon, which was at the beginning of July, and that was hosted by Monica from Monica Kim. And then I also participated in Owls, which was month long, and it wasn't technically hosted in July, but it is the readathon hosted by Book Roast, and Newts is in August. So G said that you could take your Owls in July if you want to participate in Newts in August. So that's what I did, and I completed all the challenges, so. And then I also participated in Reading Rush, which was hosted by Ariel and Raylene, and I'm sure you already know what the Reading Rush is. So many people participated and I did daily vlogs, so yeah, that was heaps of fun too. And that was week long near the end of the month. So yeah, I actually was successful in all readathons except for maybe koreadathon. I did want to read some more Korean books during that time, but I only read 2, I think. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about all the books that I read. And for Owls, my career that I chose was Hogwarts Professor teaching charms. So I'll also talk about the prompts and everything. But yes, so let's just get into the books. So the first book that I read for koreadathon was Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, and I gave this 4 stars. I absolutely loved it. If you don't know, this is basically historical fiction following 4 generations of one Korean family who immigrated to Japan in the 20th century, and so the story takes place over like 100 years. So it follows this family migrating to Japan as they try to seek a better life during the hardships of war. And in this book we learn that many Korean families were forced to move to Japan during this time, and they experienced a lot of discrimination and poor living conditions in Japan. And even though I am Korean, I actually had no idea about the historical context of this book, so I got to learn a lot, and it was definitely really hard and heartbreaking to read. There's definitely a lot of trigger warnings like for rape and suicide and a lot of dark themes. Yeah, it definitely isn't a happy book, but it was definitely hopeful and a very important read, and the way that the story was told keeps you captivated the entire time, and the book just left me broken. So I definitely recommend it. It was so well done, and I did listen to the audiobook, and the audiobook was phenomenal. The narrator was just... So yeah, this was amazing, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and it was a good start to my reading month. And then the next book that I read was Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi, and I got this arc from Book Expo. So this does come out on the 3rd of September, but oh my goodness, I loved this. This was such a fun read. So this is basically a YA contemporary following our main character Pablo, who is an NYU dropout working at a deli, and he is biracial, being half Korean and half Pakistani. He's a little lost in life. He doesn't really know what he wants to do, and one morning at 5 a.m, Leanna Smart, who is a super famous pop idol, walks into the store, and at first he doesn't really recognize her, but they start talking, and then he realizes it's freaking Leanna Smart, the pop idol. And anyway, they have an immediate connection, and they have some super cute interactions, and obviously it turns into a romance. And yeah, I was hooked immediately. Even in the first 30 pages I already had this many tabs, and I was like, oh my gosh, is this gonna be a new favorite? Is this gonna be a 5 out of 5 stars? And unfortunately it actually ended up being a 4 out of 5 stars, just because the story didn't quite go where I was hoping it would, and the romance did feel a little, not insta-lovey, but like just a little bit too fast-paced for my personal taste. But the romance was still so adorable. I really loved them together. I really love both of the characters. Pablo is amazing, and he's just so dramatic and relatable and funny, and Leanna was also amazing too, and we got to see her struggles. And one of my favorite things about this book is, I think it is classified as young adult, but I would say it's new adult because they're in their early 20s, and I feel like this book really captures what it's like to be in your early 20s and being like a little bit lost, not really knowing what you want to do. Pablo's family dynamic was also super complex and interesting to read about, and he does have a brother called Rain who is so funny, definitely one of the best characters in the book. I also loved Mary H.K. Choi's writing style. I found it to be super funny and relatable and just so enjoyable to read. There were also some amazing quotes that I really connected with. I also really related to Pablo because he is biracial, like I said, so I related to a lot of his experiences. And the book also did discuss racism a little bit, and I thought that was really well done. There was also some really great character development, and the ending was just so perfect in my opinion, and yeah, so I really loved this. So overall, definitely recommend this. It was just so enjoyable, and it makes me so excited to read Emergency Contact. So yes, comes out 3rd of September. Yes, loved it. 4 stars. The next book that I read was Fence Volume 2, and this is by C.S. Pacat, and oh my goodness, I read the first volume in January and I absolutely loved it, and I didn't pick up the second volume because the 3rd volume wasn't coming out until August, and obviously we're in August now, so I decided in July that it was time to pick up volume 2, and I just love it. This was another 5-star read for me. I just love this graphic novel series. I just love the art. The characters are amazing. There's a lot of representation, and there's like a slow burn romance in the making that I am just loving. And I just love learning more about fencing because I didn't really know much about it before. So yes, it's just so cute, and it just makes me so happy, and I'm so happy that volume 3 is coming out this month. But yes, so 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was The Unnie Mainers by Christina Lauren, and this was my second Christina Lauren book. This is a new adult contemporary romance, And the story basically starts at a wedding, and it's our main character Olive's twin sister's wedding. And at that wedding, everyone except for Olive and her arch nemesis get food poisoning, so Olive's twin sister can no longer go on her honeymoon, so she asks Olive to go on the honeymoon with the arch nemesis because they're the only two who are not sick. At first she's obviously like, no thank you, but then she ends up doing it. So it basically follows those two characters going on their fake honeymoon, pretending to be a married couple. So yeah, it's obviously like an enemies to lovers romance, and I gave this 3 stars, but I honestly feel like it's a 2 stars. Like, it was fine, but there were definitely things that really pissed me off, and I didn't really feel the connection between the two characters, mainly because I didn't really love the guy. I can't even remember his name at this point. But yeah, like, it was cute. Like, there were some cute moments, but like, I didn't love my time reading it. Yeah, I don't know. It just wasn't for me, I don't think. And I know a lot of people love this book, so I feel like I'm in the minority, but I'm never gonna think about it again. Yeah, I think I'm gonna change it to 2 stars, to be honest. The next book that I read was Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This is the Fairy Lit edition, which has the amazing green edges. But yeah, I was so excited to read this because so many people have been raving about it, and I can confirm it was amazing. I gave it 4 stars, which I actually did think I was gonna give it 5 stars. Like, I did think it was gonna be a 5-star read for me, and unfortunately it didn't quite reach that level. I just didn't get that 5-star feeling, but I did love it, and there's not really anything I didn't like about it. So this is basically a YA fantasy historical fiction following Elizabeth, who is an apprentice librarian, and she grew up living in this magical library filled with magical and dangerous grimoires, and she ends up going on an adventure with Nathaniel, who is like her enemy, because Nathaniel is a sorcerer and she's been taught that all sorcerers are evil, and Nathaniel also has a demonic servant that accompanies them on their adventure. But yeah, so it is like an enemies to lovers romance as well. Yeah, I loved so much about this. I loved the writing. It was definitely super lyrical, and I just loved the descriptions. I loved the world. Like, a magical library is just the perfect setting for any person who loves to read. So yeah, I loved that. I loved the grimoires. I thought that was a super unique and creative thing that I've never really read about. Like, obviously I've read about grimoires, but in this world the grimoires are like really unique because they each have like their own personality and they're sort of like alive, and it was just so interesting to learn more about them. I just loved the world that Margaret Rogerson created in this book. This is a fantasy standalone, by the way, and I loved learning about the sorcerers and how some people view them as evil, but maybe they're not. And I also loved learning about the demons and Nathaniel's demonic servant, who is called Silas. Silas was everything. Definitely my favorite character. Yeah, he was the best character. He was just so funny, and like, yeah, I just loved him. You just need to read it. But yeah, I also just loved Elizabeth and Nathaniel is definitely reminiscent of like Will Herondale. He definitely gives off those vibes, so I really loved that. And also Nathaniel is bisexual, so we have that representation too. Actually, I don't know if he's bisexual. It isn't stated, but it's stated that he's attracted to more than one gender. But yeah, so overall this was just so good. I'm definitely intrigued to read Margaret Rogerson's other book, Enchantment of Ravens, after this, because I just loved her writing, and yeah, I really loved it a lot. So yeah, 4 out of 5 stars. Oh, and I read that for the prompt Herbology, which was plant on the cover. So yeah. The next book that I read was Darius the Great Is Not Okay, and I listened to the audiobook, and this was for the Reading Rush and also for Muggle Studies, which was to read a contemporary. I loved this. This was a 5 out of 5 star read for me. It basically follows Darius, and he has a lot of struggles. He is biracial, so he is half Persian, half white, and he definitely struggles feeling like he doesn't fit into either of his cultures. He also just struggles with some of his family relationships. He also has depression, and I think the depression rep was done really well in this book. He is on medication, so it does show medication in a positive light. He also struggles with everyone commenting on his weight because the medication did make him gain some weight, and he personally doesn't care about the weight gain, but everyone just tries to make him feel bad about it. He also deals with a lot of racist comments all the time. For example, people at school constantly making fun of his mum's accent and everything. So he does get bullied at school, and he just has a lot of struggles, and he is just everything, so he does not deserve it. But I think this story was so beautiful, and I related to so many aspects. Anyway, so he ends up going to Iran with his family, and he also struggles in Iran because he feels like he's not Persian enough, especially because like his sister speaks Farsi but he doesn't, and I just can't imagine how hard that would be because, you know, when I go to Korea with my family, my siblings don't speak Korean either, so we have each other in that aspect. If all my siblings could speak Korean and I couldn't, that would definitely be super lonely. I also love how it showed how mental illness is viewed differently in different cultures, so some cultures aren't as accepting and just tell you to get over it and but yeah, overall I just think this was an amazing book, and I just think more people need to read it. It was just so beautiful and well done and heartbreaking and just everything. I just loved it. So many good quotes as well. And the development in the relationships and everything was just so satisfying. So yes, it was so good. 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely recommend it. The next book that I read was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. So this was a reread for me. I believe this was my 3rd time reading it. And I actually listened to the audiobook this time, which is really good. And I read this for History of Magic. So I had to read a book that was published at least 10 years ago. And obviously this was published ages ago. But yeah, if you don't know, this is one of my favorite books of all time. I just love how whimsical and weird and quirky it is. I just love Alice and I just love the themes that this book explores. So yeah, of course I gave it 5 stars. It was everything. I'll always love this book. The next book that I read was Hasta Volume 2 by Alice Oseman, and if you don't know, I love this graphic novel series. Heartstopper Volume 1 was 5 out of 5 stars, and Heartstopper Volume 2 was even better than Heartstopper Volume 1, and this was also 5 out of 5 stars. It just made me so unbelievably happy. I just love Nick and Charlie so much and their relationship. They're both soft boys and they're just so sweet, and I just love the illustration style so much. It honestly just makes me cry. Like, I just love it so freaking much. It's basically just a love story between these 2 boys, and one of them is still trying to figure out his sexuality in this book. It's just so cute, and I recommend this to like everyone. I can't wait for Volume 3. And I read Heartstopper Volume 2 for Potions Next Ingredient Sequel. The next book that I read was Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker and Wendy Zhu. This again was a 5 out of 5 star read for me. This is a graphic novel and it does come out in October, and I read this during the reading rush. So I actually buddy read this with Kevin, and we had a cute little FaceTime reading date, and we both read this together in one sitting, so we would chat throughout. And yeah, that was just so much fun. It definitely enhanced the experience and it was just amazing, and this book was amazing. It's basically a graphic novel. We basically follow Nova, who is a teen witch working at her grandmother's bookshop, and Tam, who is a non-binary werewolf. And Nova and Tam were childhood friends, but they hadn't seen each other for a while, and then Tam comes back into town because of something that's happening to Tam, and so Nova tries to help, and they also rekindle their friendship and romance. So yes, this does feature a female non-binary romance, and there also is a female-female romance because Nova has 2 grandmothers. So yes, this has a lot of representation. Nova and Tam are also both Chinese American, and Nova is hard of hearing, so she does wear a hearing aid. I can't explain how much I love this book. This just has so many elements that I love. It was so magical. The illustration style was literally amazing. Like, just look at that. It's stunning. And because this is the ARC, most of it is actually in black and white. So I can't wait for this to come out in October and read it again with the full color illustrations, because it's just honestly one of my new favorite illustration styles. And yeah, this just made me so happy. The romance is everything. Nova's family is everything. And the plot was super intriguing, and just everything about it was so good. So yes, 5 out of 5 stars. A strong 5 out of 5 stars. One of my new favorite graphic novels. So freaking good. The next book that I read was Little Monsters by Cara Thomas, and I listened to the audiobook for this, and I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. This is a YA mystery thriller, and it just wasn't really for me. I just didn't really care to see where the story went. I wasn't invested really. I didn't care about any of the characters. There were a lot of unlikable characters, which was intentional, but I just didn't like reading about them. There was some super frustrating characters, and because I wasn't into the story anyway, it was just like, I'm not enjoying this. And it was sort of intriguing, but like, I just didn't care to see where the story went, and none of the reveals really shocked me that much. So yeah, 2 out of 5 stars. Never gonna think about this again. If you have any better thriller recommendations, definitely leave them in the comments below, because I do want to get more into thrillers. But yeah, that one just wasn't for me. The next book that I read was The Monster of Ellenhaven by Jennifer Gisbert, and this was an ARC from Tor.com, so this does come out in September, and I thought this was perfect for the reading rush because it is so short. This was super interesting, and I definitely really enjoyed reading this. So this is basically an adult dark fantasy. It basically follows the monster of Ellenhaven, who is called Johan, and Johan likes to kill people, stalk people, and one day Johan sees someone who he believes to be a sorcerer, and that person ends up being Florian, and basically they embark on this dark adventure. So yes, this is definitely violent and dark, so if you're not into that, then you probably won't be into this. So I found this super intriguing. I loved the writing style, and I thought the dynamic between Johan and Florian was so interesting, and there is actually like a male thing that's going on here. So yeah, this was like dark, weird, and twisted, so definitely a good October read. But yeah, like I said, this does come out in September, and I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell, and oh my goodness, this was our Books with Friends pick for July. So we did have the live show, which I will link up above and down below if you want to watch it. But basically, this is a YA historical fiction fantasy. Most of it is set in 1902 New York, and the reason why I say most is because it actually does involve time travel, so we do get to time travel to different times. But oh my gosh. This has had so many elements that I love. I love time travel, and the way that it was done in this book was phenomenal. I love historical fiction, so I love the setting of 1902 New York. It involves heists, it has like a cool crew with amazing and interesting characters, it has a slow burn romance. Honestly, what more could you need? Like, it is so good. Oh, it has so many twists and turns. Like, honestly, I was so shocked at so many of the revelations. And I also loved the way that magic worked in this world. Basically, everyone has their own affinity, so they basically have one magical power, and I loved learning about everyone's different affinities. Obviously, the main character Hasta does have an affinity for time, so she can time travel. Yeah, there are just some characters that I just adore so much, and I was so intrigued the whole time while reading this. And it does take a bit to get into because it's a little bit confusing at first because you don't really know what's going on, but it's so worth it. This is honestly like a new fantasy favorite. Like, it was so good, and I can't wait to read the second book, The Devil's Thief. And while I was reading this, I was just like, it just gave me that feeling of like, wow, I love reading. You know, these books that just give you that feeling. So yeah, I loved this so much. 5 out of 5 stars if I haven't said that already. It was just so good. And I read The Last Magician for Transfiguration, sprayed edges or red cover. So I actually sprayed the edges myself. So I sprayed the edges black, and I love it. The next book that I read was The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang, and oh my gosh, this was 5 out of 5 stars again. As you can see, a lot of 5-star reads. This was so freaking cute. Everyone told me to read The Prince and the Dressmaker, and then Kaz told me to read it during our live reading that we did on Instagram, and so I was like, hey, I'll pick it up. And yeah, it was everything. It basically follows Prince Sebastian, who likes to wear dresses at night, so he keeps it a secret because he knows people won't be accepting of it. Prince Sebastian gets a dressmaker, and the dressmaker ends up making dresses for them, and they end up forming a friendship, and they go out together at night, and Sebastian's wearing the dresses, and it's just so wholesome. And Sebastian does like to be a princess sometimes and does like to be a prince sometimes, so Sebastian's kind of gender fluid. Obviously, there were a lot of angry moments because people were not really being accepting of him, but overall it just makes you feel so warm and happy, and it's just so wholesome, and the art style is amazing. And yeah, it was just so good. Definitely recommend it if you want to just read a cute, quick graphic novel. It was just everything. The next book that I read was another 5-star read, and that was Saga Volume 1, and this is by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, and this is a popular graphic novel series. It is adult sci-fi fantasy, and basically follow these two characters who come from warring planets, and they end up falling in love and having a little baby, and they're supposed to hate each other, so it's definitely like a shocking thing. And they end up having bounty hunters trying to kill them, so they're like running from them. Yeah, so I was really scared to read this because I'm really picky when it comes to sci-fi, and I've never really read adult sci-fi, and this is definitely pretty graphic, and it does have some sexual themes, so just keep that in mind. It is definitely adult, but I loved it. I thought it was so well done. I didn't expect it to be funny. I feel like I've never really heard anyone say that this was funny, but it definitely made me laugh. And the characters are so lovable. I just feel like it's a really accessible read because sci-fi can intimidate me because sometimes they can be really complex, but I feel like it was super easy and engaging to read. I love the art style. I just loved how weird it was at times, and yeah, it was just so good. Like, I can't wait to continue the series. A lot of people say how they're jealous that I'm reading them for the first time. I'm definitely going to cherish reading each volume, but yeah, I have already ordered the second volume, and my plan is to read 1 volume per month for the rest of the year, or however long it takes to catch up. I think there's been a long wait for the next volume, so that kind of makes me sad, but it's so good, and I definitely understand the hype. So yeah, I'm so happy that I loved it, and I'm so excited to continue and get my heart broken because apparently it's gonna be really heartbreaking, so I'm ready for it. And I read that for Charms, which was to read an adult work. Okay, so the last book that I needed to read for my owls was for Defense Against the Dark Arts, Reducto. Title starts with an R. So I needed to read a book that started with an R. I was planning to read The Red Scrolls of Magic or The Rise of Kyoshi, but I ended up not really having enough time to read another like full-length novel. So I ended up picking up Rat Queens Volume 1, which is a graphic novel, and I remember putting this on my TBR ages ago, but I didn't really remember what it was about, but I just thought it looked cool, so I read it. And unfortunately, it just wasn't for me. Maybe it was because I was just really tired after the reading rush, but I just didn't understand what the main plot was. We basically follow these 4 rat queens. I should have known this wasn't for me because, like I said, I didn't really know what it was about, but one of their main like taglines is like booze and violence or something, and that is just not my vibe. So I should have known. I definitely wouldn't have picked it up if I actually looked into it a bit more. Yeah, I just didn't enjoy it. Like, didn't have a good time reading it. It just wasn't my type of humor, and a lot of people do love this, so it might be your thing, but it wasn't my thing. Anyway, so I gave that 2 out of 5 stars, and that was the last book that I read in July. So we've come to an end. So as you would have seen, I did read a lot of amazing books, a lot of new favorites, honestly, so it was a really good reading month. And yeah, so I would love to hear what books you read or your favorite book that you read in July. But that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you're having a good day or night, and I'll see you in my next video.